Dr. Kwapong, you have taken time to write about what is going on in what you title Making Our Peace with Democracy. Why do you think that people like Professor Atugba, who have suffered, their family and they themselves have seen at first hand and suffered, the outcomes of military regimes? His father was a headmaster, and on this occasion he speaks about how his father suffered unlawfully under the regime, how his mother, his whole family was literally torn apart, and sometimes they had to dig trenches and hide people in there and cover, with plywood and so on, so that soldiers who come around don't detect that people are around to arrest them. Why do you think that people who have this experience and know, like Professor Tetua Menu say, we definitely must prefer an imperfect democracy to a military rule, why will we could be seeing a coup?
Good morning, Samson. Good morning, everyone. I mean, only the professor can truly explain the context and the reason behind those statements. But if I've had opportunity to read the full text of the speech, and I think from that initial statement of whilst nobody wants it, I am afraid that we may have one on our hands. And then he ties it into the dissertation of a colleague and friend of his that sort of talked about why coups succeed. And therefore, he makes that extrapolation and says, if these are the conditions under which a coup succeeds, economic challenges, and that if Ghana has one, then he's afraid that we may have one. So I don't, I'm sure, as you rightly said, the current conditions, the conversations we are having is driving people to begin to ask questions about the path that we are on as a country. But as you rightly said, for me, over the last couple of weeks, if you look at what has happened in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, the attempts in Guinea-Bissau, it raises concerns, right? I can understand why close within our neighbors, that if you're seeing this trend of military interventions, that it gives you cause to begin to worry.
Sorry to interrupt, but these countries, their democratic credentials don't compare at all with Ghana, correct?
Right. Yes, they don't. So let me share with you a few insights from the Afrobarometer survey and why, even within the context of some of these conversations about and the word coup being thrown around, why I keep making the case that generally I believe that Ghana has made its peace, or we are making our peace with democracy as the preferred form of government. So in the Afrobarometer survey, there's a question that asks about preference for how we want to be governed. And it says democracy is preferable to any other forms of government. It doesn't matter. Sometimes non-democracy is preferable. And over 8 rounds of the survey, close to 8 out of 10 Ghanaians have regularly said democracy is preferable to any other form of government. Yes, some days it's come down a little bit, but the worst we've even seen on support for democracy is around 69%. So that's the first point of comfort for me. Then there's a question about how do we choose our leaders in Afrobarometer. So the option is, let's do that through regular elections. And then the other statement is sometimes because elections produce bad outcomes, let's use other methods. Again, at least 80% of Ghanaians have regularly said in Afrobarometer that let's choose our leaders through elections. The other point of comfort for me is our rejection of authoritarian regimes. So again, Afrobarometer presents 3 non-democratic forms of government and says, would you approve or disapprove should they enter our political space to try and govern? Overwhelmingly, 80-something% reject one-party rule. They reject one-man rule. The other point of comfort for me is even among those in the Afrobarometer survey who say that they are dissatisfied with the way democracy works, majority of them still prefer democracy to any other form of government. And the satisfaction question in AB is very important to me because it doesn't ask whether you're dissatisfied with democracy. It asks your dissatisfaction with the way democracy works. And so if you see the ups and downs in our satisfaction with democracy, it is not a dissatisfaction with democracy itself, but the way it is working. But having said all of that, there are also some what I call sore spots that I think as a society, we really need to have some honest conversations about the democratic path that we are on. And let me quickly point out two of those. So in Afrobarometer, we have a question that asks about whether our elected representatives listen to citizens. And for members of parliament, when that question was first asked, only about 20% said our members of parliament listen either often or always, which has dropped to 11% in the most recent Afrobarometer survey in 2019. The other sore spot for me is what I call the softening of our attitudes towards military rule, right? So in the first round of Afrobarometer, about 89% of Ghanaians said they strongly disapprove of military rule. But that has dropped by almost 20%. So yes, 69% in 2019 still reject military rule. But I have been a little concerned that you see some kind of softening in our attitudes towards that. In the spring of 2017, the Pew Research Center in their Global Attitude Survey also asked about the different types of political systems, and one of it was if the military came into rule. And about 40-something% said it will be good or somewhat good, right? So for me, those are the sore spots in our democratic dispensation. Lastly, if you look at some of the variables in Afrobarometer that correlate with either support for democracy or satisfaction with the way democracy is working, you see that our support for democracy is driven by political variables. So if we trust in our democratic institutions and that we perceive less incidences of corruption among our democratic institutions, our support for democracy grows. Our satisfaction with the way democracy is working, however, in Afrobarometer, is driven by the extent to which we believe governments are delivering on key social and economic goods, creating jobs, managing the economy. So I think, for me, the bigger conversation now is how do you get our democracy to really deliver on the promise of democracy beyond just political goods like freedom of speech, the basic liberties that we are guaranteed. I mean, for me, I'm sure most people will share the sentiment that it's a good thing that we've had a relatively stable democratic dispensation, right? The Fourth Republic has lasted, since 1992. And I personally don't think anybody wants to see a disruption to it. But I think what everyone would want to see is how is it delivering on the basic economic challenges
right.
that
the CDD has had to lead discussions on topics including whether or not we are getting the dividends of our democracy, dividends. Now, my question really is, if we agree that our democratic credentials do not compare with those other countries that have suffered coup, and the others that are tipped as potential for coups, if you read most of the analysis, they take Ghana out, they take Nigeria out. You have also heard conversations about youth who are getting disenchanted, and that, like the reference was made earlier, you may see some sort of spring. So why at all should we not be concerned when the word coup is mentioned so many times in the last few months?
I don't think we shouldn't be concerned, right? I think it's an issue that we should take seriously, right? We should begin to have a sober reflection on why we are hearing this word being thrown around. Are people really agitating for one? Or as Dr. Kennedy said, is it just a question of hysteria born as a result of frustration with the economic challenges that people are facing, right? So yes, we have to be concerned, and especially if you look at what is happening in the sub-region, you cannot overlook some of these statements, references to coup that are being made. But again, for me, the bigger conversation is given the hysteria, the agitations, the concerns, the legitimate challenges that citizens are facing. How do we ensure that we address those concerns? I have never. I mean, I'm too young to experience to really recount what a military coup looks like. I mean, the first in '79, I was only 5. In '81, I was only 7. Right, so I don't have much to say in terms of what a military coup looks like. But from conversations with my mom, people in my mom's generation, I don't think coup brings anybody warm, fuzzy feelings. We've also seen how the military has governed and what they've been able to deliver. So for me, again, the issue is how do we have a conversation about how democracy must deliver? I mean, we've come too far to allow anything to disrupt this journey that we are on. And like I keep saying, for me, in Afrobarometer, the signals that I see is that we've made our peace, or we are making our peace with it. We just want to make sure that it really delivers beyond just the basic political goods.
Okay.